Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. This evening, as you probably know from early episodes of the show, I'm a really big fan of grain whiskies, and a few episodes ago we looked at one of the distilleries, the Invergordon Distillery, so I thought it was about time we took a look at one of the other grain distilleries. This evening's tasting will be looking at the Cambus Distillery. Now, the Cambus Distillery is situated in the lowlands, sort of close to Alloa. Depending upon which website you look at, it was either built in 1806 or 1813. Like I said, there seems to be a bit of a confusion as to when it was built, but it was built quite a long time ago. Apparently it was originally a mill which was converted into both a malt and a grain distillery, and was a founding member of the of DCL, Distillers Company Limited, along with the Port Dundas Distillery, the Cameron Brigg Distillery, Glenoclear, Kirkhilson, and can't read right here, Carsbridge. Apparently it just went along its merry little way without any great note until 1914, when the distillery was almost burnt down by a fire. But the large number of bonded warehouses on site were completely unscathed, so all the spirit survived, which probably you'd think as that had gone up, they'd probably known about it. It apparently took 24 years before it was up and running again, so a long time to refit. And again, it ran until it closed in 1993, so there's probably loads of it still knocking about, but like with a lot of grain whiskies, you don't really see very many bottlings of them. There's only sort of a handful of independents I've seen that have bottled this wonderful old grain whisky. So let's introduce this evening's lineup then. Right. Okay. Firstly, I'd like to thank. This is as you can see, a sample, as they all are. This was bottled by Raymond Armstrong for the Bladnoch Forum, so a big thank you to him for this particular sample. These three samples are all bottled in the Douglas Laing Clan Denny range, so again, a big thank you to them for those samples. So we'll start off with Raymond's, which is a 24-year-old. Was distilled in 1986 and bottled in 2010. The next bottling we have is, like I said, from the Douglas Laing Clan Denny range. It's the 36-year-old, distilled in 1975, bottled in August 2011. The ABV of that is 52.1. That's 52.7, by the way, just if you'd like to know. The second in the Clan Denny bottlings is this one, bottled at 49.7. It's a 47-year-old, was distilled in August of 1963 and bottled in April of 2011. And finally, we've got a 48-year-old, bottled at 49.5. Again, was distilled in August of 1963, but bottled in December 2011. So, all the tasting notes for these you can have a peek at on my WordPress blog. None of them are currently available as far as I'm aware. I don't think they are. Again, I probably should have checked to see what we've got on the snap. No, I'm pretty certain we haven't got any Cambus on the shelf. I could be wrong. have a look on the website. You tell me. Anyway, I think that's enough waffle. So I think probably time to taste the first one then. Right, okay, so let's start with this one, which is, like I said, bottled by, or was bottled by Raymond Armstrong from the Bladnoch Forum, 24 years old. Got my little jug of water just in case, right, let's see what the nose gives us then, shall we? Now, although it's 24 years old, in kind of grain terms, this is actually quite youthful. There's a lot of sort of slight spirity notes, sort of neutral spirit notes, bit of spice, and sort of quite a subservient amount of oak in actual fact. The oak is kind of sort of sat lower down, while you get all the sort of spirit character above it. Lightly juicy, a little bit of dried fruits. I mean, the interesting thing about sort of grain whiskies, as I probably said before, is that they, with age, they do tend to go in one of two directions. They'll either sort of develop this sort of almost rum-like character, or they'll tend to go more into a sort of American bourbon kind of character with, you know, the huge amounts of oak that obviously the spirit takes up. I mean, this has got a nice amount of oak. It's getting a bit buttery now, but really crisp, really fresh. Like I said, sort of, you know, a lot of neutral spirit, which essentially is what grain spirit is. But, you know, really nice. I mean, you could argue it's a bit like a sort of a well-aged, oak-aged vodka, I guess. Certainly has that kind of character to it, but a little bit of dusty spice now. It's a nice nose. I like that. Okay, palate time then. Palate is much like the nose. All about sweet, creamy spirit. A little bit of spice, a little bit of violets, touch of toffee, and then finally the oak starts to come through with a really lovely creaminess, sort of fudge, caramel, and some sort of lovely spices that just sort of sit on the edge of the tongue. Like I said, it tastes relatively young. I mean, although 24 years old, in whiskey terms is obviously not very young, but when you consider that sort of a grain whiskey can sort of age quite comfortably for double that, you know, up to about sort of like, you know, 50 odd years old. So, you know, this is a bit of a baby when it all boils down, but that's nice. And if I remember rightly, it wasn't a particularly expensive bottling either. Obviously some of the Clan Dennys can get quite expensive. I mean, you're talking sort of well over 120 quid. But then again, you are looking at sort of like, you know, 40-year-old plus spirit. So, lovely vanilla aftertaste. Almost sort of ice creamy in character. Don't think that really needed a drop of water. There was a bit of, you know, piquancy to the alcohol, but don't think it really needed it. I think if you'd probably put a drop of water with that, I think the oak would have come forward a lot more. It would have been a lot more fudgier and sweeter. But yeah, that was rather nice, I think. Right, okay, on to the 36-year-old. Like I said, distilled in 1975 and bottled in 2011. So let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Now there is a sort of a similarity between the two. You can certainly see that again the sort of the spirit character is sort of hovering well above a real thick core of oak. There's a nice kind of almost wheaty kind of bourbon character to it, with a little bit of spice, touch of black pepper, toffee. The oak is starting to assert itself now, but it's got that lovely edge to it, a lovely bite, a bit like sort of a rye whiskey has that sort of nice kind of bite to it, which often sort of balances the wheat and the corn component quite nicely. I often find that sort of the grain whiskies have a kind of similar kind of profile. They have that sort of bite to them that with sort of some serious age can almost sort of like be taken for a sort of a rye whiskey. Very full, little bit of earth, lovely sweetness though. Like I said, it's sort of got a lovely oak sweetness with a sort of little bit of fruitiness. I mean, grain whiskies are never going to be the most fruitiest whiskies on the planet, but this has got a lovely sweetness to it. Really nice. Right then, palate. Oh, that's spicy. Like I was saying, a lot of times they can come across a bit like a spicy rye, and this certainly doesn't quite have the earthiness of an American rye. It's a lot softer, more toffeed oak, a little bit of caramel. The spice is gorgeous, really soft, yet they have an edge to them, a little bit of a sort of a peppery edge to them. Again, the oak is not huge. It seems to be more about the spirit, and there's a slight creaminess, a little bit of herbalness to the spirit. But yes, you can certainly see the step up. There's very much a sort of a similarity between these two. And it's lovely and soft, really very, very nice. Like that. That was very, very good. Right, okay, let's move on to the next one. This is the 47-year-old. Like I said, distilled in 1963, bottled in April 2011. So we've got another 10 years, 11 years gap between these, so it'll be interesting to see what this has in store for us. So, now that is a wheated bourbon. It's wheaty and darkly fluffy, molasses, licorice, dark dried fruits. Oh, that's stunning, absolutely stunning. A little bit of a demerara sweetness, some wonderful peppery spice. Oh, it's just a big nose. Now, I mean, now you can see the oak is starting to really starting to get to grips with this. I mean, there is a little bit of the sort of the slightly creamy spirit right on the edges of the nose, but now we're really getting into sort of like the oak complexity and what sort of 40 odd years in an oak cask will do to a spirit. Ah, that is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. A little bit of smoke possibly, but oh, it is just got wheated bourbon stamped all over it. Absolutely amazing. God, I could sniff this all night. Better not, because otherwise I'll never finish the video. Yeah, that is absolutely sensational. That's stunning. I'll try it. Oh, that is gorgeous. Where do you start unravelling that? Lots of dried fruit. It's moved in. It kind of starts off a bit kind of bourbony like, lots of fruit, lots of oak, and then in comes this sort of almost rum-like dried fruit character. Some molasses, some dark treacle, slightly bitter, slightly smoky, dark chocolate. No end of peppery spice, certainly on the finish. But that is just amazingly long. I mean, it's just really complex. Like I said, I mean, it does start off with quite a bit of oak, but all those wonderful sort of aged oak flavours just sort of keep coming through in waves. That's really, really nice. Yeah. That, I mean, that was not cheap. That must have, I think, about 130 odd quid. But that was definitely worth every penny. Very good. Right, okay, and finally the 48-year-old. This again was distilled in 1963 and bottled in December of 2011. Kind of not expecting a great deal of change. Obviously, a year, I guess, out of 40 odd isn't going to make a huge amount of difference, but you know, could be wrong. Let's see, shall we? Less wheated bourbon, this particular one. More bourbon-like. Slightly more corny, quite fat. A lot of oak. Black pepper, bit of spicy grains. Possibly a little bit more high toned actually. A little bit more, maybe some citrus. Yeah, it's less wheaty, definitely less wheaty, and like I said, more bourbon like. Really nice though. I mean, you know. I mean, certainly quality, there's not a lot to choose between the two of them. They're just quite different, and it just goes to show how sort of, you know, the same spirit can be quite different, you know, between bottlings, certainly when you're talking about single casks. Nice brittle toffee sweetness, quite a bit of vanilla, pure vanilla. Madagascan vanilla possibly, a sort of slightly dark vanilla poddy kind of vanilla. That's nice, that's different, like that. I like that. Oh, that's different. That's more like an oily Guyanan rum. Sort of thick oils with that kind of, like I said, almost Guyanan kind of dried fruit rancio. A little bit of spice. Now I'm getting a little bit of dark chocolate, a little bit of toffee, dark toffee on the finish. Very gently spiced. Probably a little bit more sort of crisper. There's probably, it certainly felt fresher, I guess, on the palate. A little bit more citrus character. Certainly not as wood dominated as the previous one, but ooh, that's stunningly good. Yeah, I like that. I mean, that again, that was not a cheap bottle of whiskey, but you know, if you did pick yourself up a bottle of that, then you know, I think you were well rewarded. I think, if memory serves me correct, this one, the 47-year-old, I think Jim Murray gave that a 97.5, and well, I think that was, I can understand why. I mean, that was just absolutely stunning. Anyway, getting a bit ahead of myself here. I'm kind of wrapping up before I've wrapped up, haven't I? Right, okay, let's wrap up properly then, shall we? Right, Cambus, interesting distillery. I mean, it's often difficult with the grain distilleries to sort of say, here is a distinctive distillery character, because you know the nature of grain whiskey is that it doesn't really have a great deal of character at the end of the day. It is practically vodka. It comes off the still at sort of like 80-odd%, and it has that sort of like sometimes it has a bit of a floral character, sometimes it has a bit more of a sort of graininess, but essentially most of the character of a grain whiskey is going to be derived from the oak that it's aged in. And as we saw from the first bottling at 24 years old, it was pretty young, and it was more about the sort of the creamy spirit than the oak itself. Although the oak was certainly there and giving it some support. So it was a really nice bottling, a really interesting bottling to look at a relatively young grain whiskey. 36-year-old, well, there was obviously a definite link. They were very, very similar in character. You could tell that the 36-year-old was a little bit older. There was a little bit more oak coming through, but essentially, it was pretty much the same. It was there was definitely this kind of creamy spirit character and a sort of a solid oak kind of core. It wasn't really until you start getting into the very old expressions, the 46, the 47 and the 48-year-old, when the oak really started to come through in less of a sort of one-dimensional vanilla-y kind of sweet toffee kind of mode, and really started bringing with it some serious complexity, some sort of the dried fruits. Well, I mean, the dried fruits are more the oxidation rather than the oak, but the sort of the dark chocolate, the spices, that kind of thing. And coming through with just a wonderful balance, and I think that's the lovely thing about old grain whiskies, is that although they are very, very old, and a lot of malts by the time they get to this kind of age would be well and truly dead, but the grain whiskies tend to have a much higher ABV, obviously, so they can last that length of time, but also they have this kind of graininess, this bite, sometimes a citrus character, sometimes almost a rye-like character, which kind of really balances up the oak. I mean, if it didn't have that, it would just be just taste all of old oak, and would be horribly one-dimensional. But that kind of grainy bite gives it a kind of a really nice lift on the palate. So that's one of the really interesting things about old grain whiskey. So I think you really ought to give them a shot. Get yourself one of them. I mean, we've got several currently on our website, www.gauntleys.com. There's a wonderful 22-year-old Girvan, I think it is, bottled by James MacArthur. A number of bottlings in the Clan Denny range, which again you really ought to have a look at, because they are just stunningly good. I would just like to say that I hope you enjoyed the episode of the show, and I'd like to think that this was a very unbiased review. I mean, at the end of the day, I am indeed sent samples by distilleries and independent bottling companies, because at the end of the day, it is my job to sell whiskey. I'd make no bones about that. I'm not a blogger, I'm not a reviewer, I'm not someone that sort of buys a bottle of whiskey and then sort of writes a comment about it. My job is to basically sell this stuff to you, the viewers. if I like it, I stock it, you know, and I tell you about it. If I don't like it, I don't stock it. I still tell you about it, you know. And you know, if any of you have indeed read my my newsletters, you'll know that you know, at the end of the day, I call a spade. You know, if I think the whiskey or whatever spirit I'm tasting is really good, then I will give praise. If I think it's a poor spirit, for whatever reason, whether it's, you know, just a manky old cask, or whether it's a Salford cask, or whatever, you know, I'll say so. I mean, as you know, it's got me into trouble a few times, but I would, you know, like to think that I give a completely and utterly unbiased opinion, because at the end of the day, you know, I'm trying to sell this to you, and you know, it's it's me on the line. You know, if I say this something's good, then I truly believe it's good. You know, you may well sort of not particularly like the style or what have you, but I'd like to think if you did buy a bottle, certainly an independent bottling from us, then you know, you'll be quite happy with the quality. But anyway, that's enough of that. So like I said, hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you for watching, and all I have to say is there's no whiskey left in my glass, so good dramming and good evening. More booze.
Horrible.
Not being horrible.
More booze. I can't do anything about it.
That's off the chocolate woman.
I bought it.
You got enough there?